Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our edition of Proper Content Architecture. I'm going to share my screen here. I thought I was sharing my screen, but I wasn't. Here we go. All right. So today we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, designing and configuring content architecture, sort of before you start coding, how to future-proof content models, how to design a content first system that can evolve and grow over time, all kinds of great stuff. And I'm really happy to get going on this.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Joel?
You know what? I'm doing pretty great because you want to know why? We're here to learn about each other and we're all in this together. And you know what? I want folks to ask questions. It's okay to interrupt. Use the, hopefully by now we're all sort of familiar with the chat and the ask questions stuff that's on there. James and I will try to keep an eye on the Q&A, but feel free to use the chat, use the Q&A, and we will interrupt. We will answer your questions. If you are watching this recorded on YouTube, please use the comments on there or message us on Twitter or any of the other places and social media that you can get in contact with us, and we'll try to continue the conversation that way. Here we are. I am joined today by my good friend James Vidler, VP of Product here at Agility CMS. And he is having a great day because this is the first day that your puppy is getting dog walked by somebody else.
I know. I finally have a break. It's been 3 months.
You love your dog.
Yeah, no, she's been great. No, I was just telling Joel earlier that I have sort of a little anxiety just seeing her, walk out the door with somebody else. I don't even have kids yet. I don't know how I'm going to be with kids.
Well, I know that you have done a ton of website building sort of you've done that as a web developer, as a sort of helping other folks out as they're taking designs and sort of deriving content models from there. So I'm really excited to work with you today just to do an example of that for some other folks.
Yeah, it's always been a bit of a passion of mine too. It's kind of fun to build this stuff out.
Yeah. In case you don't know, my name is Joel Varty. I'm president here at Agility, and we've been doing these webinars sort of for the past few months, and we're going to continue right on into the future, doing these webinars on a regular basis to help drive the education and sort of keep the conversation moving forward about content management, about CMS, about web development, and all the things that make the internet a great place. So let's move forward. I don't have a whole lot of slides today. In fact, I really only have one slide, and I have these 4 words on this slide. I have content first and design first, which I think are kind of thought of as 2 different concepts. And I normally think of a design first. When I think of starting a website from scratch, usually, okay, go, fill out some requirements and then someone does a design before I start coding or doing any architecture. And so often we have a design and then we have to derive content from that. What do you think about that in terms of like the getting started process of the website, James?
And I've been through this process many, many times with a whole bunch of different teams and things too. And I think, what ends up usually happening is, someone needs a website and then there's a development team and a project manager that actually end up building that website. And people always inherently think design first. They always think about, okay, how is my pages going to look? And sort of like the content and how that's structured is usually an afterthought. Obviously, where possible, the person that's designing wireframes and building the design should be thinking about, content as well. But to be honest, it usually doesn't happen that way. And at the end of the day, there's a team and you're like, hey, okay, I have the designs. I have to go build this website now. That doesn't mean you should just scrap the whole sort of content first methodology, right? The whole purpose of thinking content first is to sort of be able to separate your content from your presentation layer a little bit and have that separation of concerns a bit so that your content and its structure can live on, but your front end can evolve over time, right? Or be completely rebuilt.
Yeah. And I think the idea is that we want to start this conversation, and we've talked about doing webinars with content modeling and content architecture for a long time. And right now it's really exciting because I think there was a pretty big product release with Agility that just happened recently. You want to talk about that for a minute, James?
Yeah. One of the things we really, discovered through doing a lot of user testing was that, we were talking about, the importance of content first and thinking more content first. But we sort of looked at our own platform and sort of realized that, the way in which you sort of define your content in our system was very developer-y and it was very verbose and it just wasn't all that accessible. still very powerful, but we really wanted to make it easier to use, a little more straightforward, less configuration required, to make it easy so that even if you're not really a developer and you're, maybe just want to be able to add some validation to fields or add a new field or something like that, you can still go ahead and do that in a very, user-friendly manner and hopefully quickly. So that's what we try to focus on. And very proud to announce that, our new content modeling section went live a couple of weeks ago now. Getting some great feedback from users using that. I know a lot of developers are happy about some things in particular that I can certainly touch on later on as I show that.
Well, yeah. So which brings me to the format of this webinar today. So we're going to keep in mind the ideas of content first. We're going to keep in the idea that oftentimes with a project, you end up starting with a design that's already been done, and hey, this is what's been approved. Here's your Photoshop file or your PDFs, or sometimes it's I've been given printouts before. Here, build this for me.
Napkins.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop my sharing of this screen, and I'm just going to jump to my iPad. So what we decided to do today was like, hey, let's just pick a website and say, okay, pretend that that's our design, and we'll start going through the content architecture portion of what we would normally do to sort of start building the content architecture. So here's the website that we chose. This is my iPad, and we're going to do netlify.com. Pretty popular website, pretty popular platform. Apparently there's 1 million developers using Netlify now. We're one of them. Cool. So I'm just going to scroll real quick just through this, and James, talk me through what you're seeing.
Well, before I get into that, I just want to reiterate that, we're starting from a design here, something that's already sort of done, but we're going to still take a content first approach to modeling that in the CMS so that, we can have a structure here that this site can evolve over time and they don't have to rebuild everything from scratch each time. And that's really goes back to our vision, which is, you should be able to build websites and backends in your CMS that don't need to be rebuilt from scratch every time you do a website redesign. Of course, you'll have to, rejig some pieces and things here and there, but you shouldn't have to start from ground zero every time. And, the more time and energy you put into forward thinking that is going to save you a lot of time, energy and effort in the long run. So without further ado, let's break down this design a little bit. Let's look and see what's on this page and how might that translate. Now
we didn't build this website, we're taking it as if someone had just given this design to us. So James, talk me through a little bit about what you see.
So I would the first thing I would normally do when I do this is just get an overview of the page. What is actually on here, and just start breaking it up just mentally in terms of what is on here. So I can see at the top there was a sort of a banner. Okay, cool. There's some text there, some buttons. Further down here, it looks like they're listing some case studies and things like that. And then it looks like further down is really just more sort of page specific content, right? This is content that's probably not going to be reused across other pieces of the site. There's a sort of an area there that lists some frameworks that they support. Maybe those might get reused across the site. I can see here that there's some testimonials as well. And then there's, then they sort of have this marketing content that again is still very sort of page specific.
Lots of marketing type stuff on here.
Lots of marketing stuff.
A lot of home pages have.
And then those link out to, external pages that I'm sure talk more details about that. And then scrolling down here, you've got even more testimonials. And it looks like these ones might even be from Twitter. So there's a bit of a mix of a few different things on this page, right? There's sort of page specific content, and then there's content that you could see might be reused on other pages and things. So when you're thinking of a content first approach, that's actually where we want to start off first, is defining, okay, what content, in this design is going to be, reused across multiple pages on your site. Or think outside your site too. Maybe those get used and syndicated into an app or digital signage, something like that. So that's the first thing that you want to look at, is defining what is that content that's going to be used a lot, and that is the most important place to start. So we know from going through here. What did I say? We have there's case studies there. So case studies would be one thing that that's content that's gonna be shared, and I'm just looking at the design there. It looks like those even link off to details pages. So I bet you, when they create a case study, they want that to sort of automatically create a page as well.
Right.
So that's also something to note, is that, a case study probably represents a page, and then they could also list case studies and other pages that link back to those pages.
Okay. So talk me through the case study. What if we were to say, okay, case studies are probably shared. What would you then do to say, okay, a case study is a shared piece of content. How do we break that down?
Yeah. So then once you sort of identify that, then you want to look at, okay, what sort of makes up a case study, right? What does a case study actually have? And, just looking at this listing here, looks like it has an image, potentially maybe a separate thumbnail, hard to say, but let's just say an image for now. It's got looks like it has a title, Cornerstone on demand achieves 25% better performance. Looks like it's got a, paragraph of text, like a short description or an excerpt. Then it looks like it's got, some stats there as well.
Yeah, the stats are interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting one, but I'm just going to put stats for now.
Yeah, let's just put stats there. We don't have to, don't have to dive too deep into that quite yet. Yeah.
Looks like it might have a logo as well, and maybe like a company that it's linked to. So I'm just going to call it a logo, maybe. And maybe company, something like that. On this one, it's like Cornerstone is the company.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. It might be associated to a company, or at least a company name. We've got a logo there too. And, it's going to link off somewhere as well. So, it might have a URL maybe to a specific page, or maybe it just has a URL slug, right? That actually might be used to generate a dynamic page off of that. So let's just
my favorite field name ever, slug.
Slug.
Looks like it has a date as well. I'm seeing a date up there.
Oh yeah, date. It looks like it's got an author as well.
That's right. Wow, there's a lot of fields here.
So yeah, before you know it, we now have a pretty decent amount of fields on on this case study. And then really it looks like the meat of this thing is, it's just text content. So that could be something that you use like a WYSIWYG area for, right? That editors can feel quite comfortable in. It doesn't need to be structured content in that. I call
that details. So the other thing is you started talking a little bit about data types. So I think the details is probably going to be like something like Markdown or maybe HTML or
either HTML or Markdown, or we'll just say rich text.
So we can even start getting into data types once we get a little deeper into this. I mean, obviously we don't have time to go too deep into things, but I can see an image that's probably going to be like an attachment. So it seems obvious. Title is like text, excerpt, text. This stats one, that's an interesting one.
Because it looks like you could. Now, does every case study just have 2 stats, or they have like multiple?
This one doesn't have any.
That one just has.
It's got some different stuff on
some logos.
Yeah, some other logos. So yeah, it's hard to say what that was. Like I can see where you're going, because I could have like 4 fields. It's like stat 1 label, stat 2 label, stat 1 value, or you could link off to another list. So we probably want to decide how to do that one at some point. I would probably link it off to a linked content if I was building it in Agility. And we could talk more about that later.
Depends how flexible you need it to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Going through here, are there any other fields that are like non-standard? Logo, that's probably an
logo.
Image,
that's
company.
An image. Company's text.
Although it could be that we could probably derive this off to like a company's list if we wanted to.
You could.
Have to.
That might. There is a a limit, right? You don't want to sort of build too much of a complex object that you're sort of dealing with here. So I always sort of err on the side of keeping it simple.
Yeah. Cool. Just keep an eye on the chat here.
Oh, interesting. Right. Olga just mentioned that they can see the back of your head when you're using the tablet. Oh, I see. Yeah. But Olga, you can actually see the tablet though, right?
Hopefully everyone can see the screen that we're sharing. I'm just going to double check the I think we're coming through. I can see it for sure. Yeah, it looks a little weird because I'm looking down. I'm actually having my pen in my hand.
Okay, cool.
All right, awesome. Hopefully this is our first time doing something in this format. What we wanted to do is show the collaborative aspect of doing content architecture as a team.
Yeah. Cool. So that's case studies. That's a pretty big one there. And I think we can get into the more details there when we actually build that in we actually model that in Agility. So let's move on to what was the other? There was another one here that we saw that was testimonials, right?
Testimonials, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
so
let's just draw that out.
Yeah, let's look at testimonials. So testimonials looks like they have a name, title, and company. It doesn't look like these link off to their own pages. So, testimonials might be shared across other pages, but they probably won't have their own page that represents a testimonial. Looks like we've got an image that represents the testimonial, and then we actually have the comment itself, or it's called the comment.
Cool. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So I've listed those, and then it really looks like everything else that's on this homepage is really page specific content. Content that is probably not going to be reused across multiple pages, but obviously editors still need to be able to manage that content.
Sure.
But let's worry about that after. I would say, let's highlight some of those areas that we need for now, and then we'll come back to it.
Sure.
So, can you scroll back up to the top there?
Yeah. So let's just go through the page, and because the other thing you'd want to do. So we've picked out shared content, and then normally you'd want to go through and break that page apart into specific zones and modules, right?
Yeah. Right now I just want to sort of pick apart these sort of pieces into what we call modules in Agility. These modules are things that editors can just add to pages, and the content is really specific to that page. And that's sort of where we make where we differentiate content that's shared across pages versus content that's just on a single page. So the modules we can sort of break up on this page. It looks like we've got this sort of, what do you want to call this? Like banner?
I want to call it a hero.
Hero? All right, let's call it a hero.
The hero. I've seen that used a lot. I've seen
hero, Jumbotron, banner, whatever.
Yeah, kind of depends. Oops, so I'm just getting some news in there. Okay, so and the hero, and we could break down what content is in that hero if we want to, right?
So it looks like we've got, there's an image in the hero. It looks like there's a title and a subtitle.
Pretty simple. Subtitle. Looks like there's a couple links.
Yeah, a couple links. It looks like there's a sort of a primary CTA or link 1 and link 2. Yeah.
Link 2, and then
it looks like there's even a little third line there. Is when did you join Find Your Spot on the timeline? That's actually pretty
cool. So yeah, and you can see how the naming things in computers is like the hardest thing in computer science is like naming things and caching, right? So we have like link 1, link 2, and third line, which may make no sense outside of this design, right?
Yeah.
So it could be that we want to name things slightly differently, or maybe this only lives for this design and we can change the names later. So it's a great question of how do you name stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably when we actually if we put this in Agility, I'd probably name them like primary link, secondary link, and then like tertiary line or something like that.
Sure. Then we'd have an argument about that, and you'd probably win.
And then someone's still gonna complain that it doesn't make any sense later. Right?
Secondary link, and then people would say, "What the heck does tertiary mean?" All right, cool. Primary link, technically, or CTA, which refers to. It took me a long time to find out what does CTA mean. It means call to action.
Yeah.
So that's like marketing language for we want you to click on here to go do something. Cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Then it looks like we have a module here that uses.
This isn't testimonials.
This is case studies. Right. Yeah. So we can actually have a module that an editor could add to a page in Agility that pulls. Specific case studies that they want to showcase. So it can we'll have a shared list of case studies, but the module itself can actually allow editors to search and select the case studies that they actually want to appear on this page. So case studies module itself, it really isn't going to have much in the way of content. It's just going to allow editors to be able to select, one or many case studies that they will want to highlight here. So we can do that using what we call in Agility a link content field, which we'll get into.
Gave you a little hint there. I called it link content. Okay, hopefully that's readable. Cool. Yeah, and we could call it like featured case studies or something like that too. Is another thing we can do.
Yeah. And then let's do just for sake of time. I'm not sure if we'll be able to sort of scaffold out everything on this page, but why don't we skip down to the testimonials or the testimonial? Because we'll have an example of that hero module, which is page specific, and then we'll have the case studies one. And actually, you know what?
Okay.
That one's a really good one. The one at the top.
This one, sorry, I'm just scrolling
this one
quite
here.
crazy.
This one here.
Okay.
We're ready to roll, easy to extend. That's actually going to be a really good example of how you can have like flexible content that's just on one page. So if we're looking at,
can I interrupt for 1 second, James? So there's a question, and I don't want to forget. So what's the and this is a great question because who knows the right answer? What do you think the ideal amount of call to actions a B2B website should have?
Oof. The answer is usually not many, but I don't. But I couldn't tell you.
You know what? I would say the answer is that's not the developer's job. So what we want to do we're kind of like the architect right now, and we've been given a design, and the idea is that choice has been made well before this. However, I think that 3 is probably like max, right? You have like the primary, secondary, and like the tertiary, and it's like really do this, and if not, maybe do this one, and if you kept scrolling, okay, please click on this one because you didn't click on the other 2. So there's like kind of 3, which is good. What I run into a lot is that marketers come and it's like, well, I don't have the 3rd link I want to use this module on another page. I don't have a 3rd link. So if they don't type in the 3rd link, that portion, so like that's back up here, right? When we have this, we've got link 1, link 2, and then the 3rd one. If I don't have the 2nd one or the 3rd one in my content, then as a developer, we need to make sure that we handle that. So I think it's a great question of trying to decide what's the best amount. And often 3 times, I think for calls to action is a pretty good one. But oftentimes you end up seeing where the content managers just don't have that content. And so they want to leave it blank. So good call. Sorry, James, I distracted you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, like our goal here is to be flexible, right? So if as a marketer you want to add a bunch of different CTA links, you should be able to do that, within reason.
So what I'm gonna actually put a note on this, and then like zoom in and go like be flexible, because that's important. I think it's really important to try to keep that in mind. Want to be flexible because if we forget about that, then if we forget about being flexible, then our content becomes really locked in and people won't use it. They just won't use that module, or they'll type in things that we don't want them to type in.
Yeah. So let's look at this all set, no setup, ready to roll, easy to extend thing that they got going here. So it's hard to tell on the sort of mobile view that you have there, but on desktop, those sort of things actually, oh, there you go. Yeah, they actually sort of float left and right. So, it flows nicely as you're reading it. You've got a little bit of content on the left, you've got some content on the right. And if you scroll down, it sort of follows that flow in sort of opposite order. So this can be a really flexible, module or widget that you can add to your website. And it should be fairly flexible. So if marketers have something like this that they can just add to pages, then they just need to worry about putting in the right content and finding the right images, and they're going to have something that's going to look pretty darn good. So
yeah, I think in the Agility CMS website, and I know in our content model, I call this left-right content because I couldn't think of a better name, because you have the ability to, what we did is we actually, because there's a bunch of different ways to do this one, we actually did this as where each one of these ends up being its own module. So that's one module with the content, and I said, hey, this one, put it on the right. And then this one is put it on the left. So it's like I have a drop down for is the image on the right or the left. And that just affects the code. There's other ways to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's another way to do it too, where this whole thing could be one module, and then those can sort of have sub content, like a nested list underneath that has a list of these sort of items that are there. So two different ways to do the same thing. But I think I actually kind of like your approach better, where you just add the modules right on top of each other. I think that's actually simpler.
I'm gonna call it right left content.
Yeah.
I don't know. It made sense to me. So if we call it right left content, and I'll actually talk you through how I did that, because this is literally, we have this on the Agility CMS website, almost the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And then the trick is don't get fooled by the title. So there's another module that we have that's just a title subtitle module. that we can use anywhere. So it's like there's two different strategies.
Yeah.
One is you give people like really small chunks of things that they can put wherever they want. And then the other one is like build a bigger module that has a lot more functionality so that it's like a little more complex. And I think we've seen both, and either one can work. It kind of depends on your users. But let's look at the right left content one. Let's not worry about the title one right now. So we have
we've got an image, and then we've got that title. I'm
gonna call this header actually.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm gonna call that header because that'll remind me as a developer, this is gonna be like an H3 tag or something. And then we've got some list items. And this is I always find this question. If I have like an unordered list here, do I actually make it a list, or do I just make it like a multi-line text field and then they just put one on each line?
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna call it list.
Yeah, for something like this, for something that's probably going to be used for many different things, and it may not always be a list, I think actually having that as a sort of a WYSIWYG area is probably the best thing there. And then the developer, all they need to do is just make sure if someone uses, an unordered list like that in the WYSIWYG, that it renders, with the nicely formatted with, in this case, they have, those check marks as their sort of bullet icons. So that's certainly something the developer can just make sure will work if someone puts that in a WYSIWYG area. And then because that gives the marketer the ultimate flexibility here. Like they have a line underneath too that has some text and has a hyperlink in there. So that's going to give the editor the most flexibility.
Okay. All right. That seems like pretty straightforward. And then there's one thing missing. How do I tell whether the image is going to be on the right or the left? So we need like maybe a radio button, right? So a right left. Yeah, a radio button or a drop down. So here's
maybe just call it
image placement.
Image placement. Yeah. That's a good idea. Good name.
See, when you do this with a friend, you end up coming up with much better things. I would not do this in a committee of like 9 people, because then you'll always come up with the wrong answer because everyone will want their word and all that sort of stuff. But I think 2, maybe 3 people, perfect. If you do this on your own, you will think you have the best ideas ever. And then you'll show up to somebody and they will like, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, they'll be like, I don't understand what this means. So it certainly helps to do this with someone else. Yeah, it's a good exercise.
Yeah, and then you have someone that can back you up too. Just like, well, this is why we called it tertiary and not third or something like that. So that's cool, right? And I think that's pretty good. That's enough. Like that's quite a bit of things to get on there. Lots of stuff that we've done. Why don't I stop sharing my screen or stop sharing my iPad and you can share Agility and we'll actually implement some of this stuff. That'll be fun. I'm having fun here. We haven't done this in a long time.
Let's do it. All right, let me share my screen now. Cool. So for those of you who may not have seen our new content modeling section here it is. You can find it right here on the left navigation. One of the bigger changes we made here was we really wanted, it was buried in settings before, and now it's, a lot more prominent as it should be. And if you do need a refresher on like how you should think about this kind of stuff when you are building your things, definitely take a look at this getting started guide here. Because it really goes over the steps that, we just sort of verbally went through, but it's just like, first thing is, defining your sort of content that's not specific to a page. Then we can initialize that content. And then we're going to sort of integrate it with page management. So I'm going to go through the steps right now of, we know that our case studies is, content that is going to be shared across the site. So we're going to define that in the system first. And then we'll look at the sort of page specific modules afterwards, because often the modules will actually link to that content. So you kind of have to have your sort of non-page specific content set up first, then you sort of go to your page content. So let's jump in there. Let's create a new content definition. Well, actually, I don't need these anymore. These are old. Get rid of those. So let's create one. Let's call this case study. And under my description here, I'll say, this defines a case study.
By the way, I vote for description to become required eventually, because I think having a description for a type is so important.
Fair enough. So under type here, it actually gives us a couple different options. It's saying like, hey, is this thing that you're defining, is this going to be a list of items or is it going to be a singular item? In this case, it's a list. They're going to have multiple case studies.
Right.
But an example of an item would be like, let's say you just wanted to have an item that holds some configuration settings or
Yeah.
something that represents maybe your header. You only
Yes.
have one header in your website. So your
Yep.
header could define what logo you use there and what links are in there. But we're not going to look at that today. We'll just create a list. So now that I've created this list, or sorry, this definition called case study.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is like, what's the difference between a definition and a list? And I think you'll show us that later, right?
Yeah, so right now we're defining that sort of content. But what's unique about Agility is you can reuse your definitions. So we could have multiple different lists of case studies based on the same case study definition, which makes it very helpful to reuse your definitions. So you don't always have to create new definitions for all your types of content all the time. This can certainly save you time, and you can, developers and architects can sort of reuse pieces of that.
Right, cool.
So under this, Joel, you want to remind me what some of those fields were that we looked at?
Sure. On a case study, we had, I'm going back, we had a title. And the order of fields is kind of important here because we actually wrote it, the first thing we wrote down was image. But I think when you're actually looking at something, I think you'd like to see the title first. That's me.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm just going to go through these though.
So we'll go ahead, we'll add the title. Then what?
We did have an excerpt, maybe the next one, or date or author, maybe go next. I'm not sure. You can always move these around later too.
Move around.
So maybe just crank them in.
An excerpt would probably be, multi-line just text.
Yeah, I think multi-line text. I don't think we want HTML in there.
Yeah.
Might need to be required. I think that should be required.
All right, let's make that required. And you know what? I didn't make my title required. So I'm going to modify that and make my title required.
Yeah, you can always come back and fix these things. Although making something required after you have a whole lot of data is not necessarily a good idea. So it's something you want to get right the first time. We have an excerpt. We have an image.
So the image is obviously going to be a image field. So we'll select that here. And we've got some different things we can configure on images. We can specify that the image is required. And I would say for a case study, you should probably have an image. Otherwise you shouldn't be publishing it.
So take me through this. So as you change the field type, all the different field properties change down below. And there's a lot for an image.
Yeah. So one of the things you can configure here is require editors to set an alt text. And this is just good practice. So we can turn that on. And then we can set other things like certain file size restrictions, image width. And so this can be really handy for us to sort of limit, what size images people actually end up using. Sorry, you were going to say something, Joel?
Well, and there's even advanced settings even below that. What's the advanced settings do? Maybe we don't want to click in there. It's like too many things.
Well, the advanced settings, you can get more granular control. So if you want them to only be able to select a very specific file type, or if you actually want, a default image to be selected already. So when someone, creates a new item, there's already an image there. Maybe it's an image that you reuse. And then of course you can, decide that you want to hide the field. So if for whatever reason you don't want to use the field anymore, but you don't want to remove it from your data model, you can just hide the field. So editors can't interact with it. But it's still in your data model. Right. So that could be useful for, deprecating old fields where it's like, you don't really want to get rid of the field altogether, but you just want people to stop using it. Now I'm not going to be too concerned here about file size, image or height, because there's actually in when you're coding the website, you can actually request certain sizes of that sort of source image using our query strings and to generate thumbnails. So as a developer, you actually have a lot of control over how you want to be able to, get the right size for images. I might put in something here being like, okay, definitely make sure, there should be a limit. Like the source image shouldn't be larger than 300 kilobytes, or maybe something more like, 1,000 kilobytes. You don't want someone using a 1 megabyte image.
Right.
Should at least
but if they did use if I didn't have a limit on there as a developer, I probably want to be pretty smart about, okay, I'm not just going to take off because I haven't set any restrictions on there. So I probably want to make sure that I thumbnail this image with a query string to set the size that I want. And in that case, if I know I need to have an image that in some cases has to be like 800 pixels wide or 1200 pixels wide, I might want to set parameters on that, but you can come back and change these things and to get them right. So
we had a
this is
question.
one we see a lot.
Yeah, and we just had a question here. I just wanted to ask from Solomon. It says, "What if the user does not acknowledge the fact that there is a default image? Will the image he selects override it?" The answer is yes. Yeah. If the default image is selected there, they can just overwrite that image with another image.
Cool.
Cool. So, we've gone ahead and added our image field here. And as you can actually see, we can start to sort of preview what this form is actually going to look like from an editor's perspective as well. So it's really quick for us to sort of make some judgment decisions in terms of order of the fields and get an idea for what it's going to look like for the editor. Okay. What other fields we got there, Joel?
We have excerpt, we have logo, we have company, we have details. Slug.
So logo. So I already added an image. So we'll say that that's the. Oh no, there
was an image,
company,
and then there was like a company logo. Yeah, so we could do a company list, but you were thinking maybe just have two fields, company name.
I would just say let's keep
logo.
It simple.
Sure.
Two fields. So we'll say company image.
Company logo, yeah, and then company name. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
And we can put a max length in this too. Like, reasonably speaking, a company's name shouldn't be more than 100 characters.
Sure.
I feel like we're missing something else here. What else?
So we had the date, we had the author, we have the details, like the main rich text.
All right, so let's do date. That's a date time field here. We don't really care about the time. Probably don't need to show what time the case study was published.
Yeah.
And we can also set it to default to the current date, so that if someone's creating this, it means that they might be publishing it the same day. So
I would suggest that a whole bunch of these that we've put in there probably want to be required. Otherwise, our rendering is not going to work worth much. But that will be a good thing to review later once we get all this in place. It's always a good thing to review later. So we have the, we have the date, the company name. You've got the author.
All right, so author, here we go. We want to create a author, and we could just put author name. Or, we could have that link to a list of authors that we actually might have in the CMS already. Now, we don't have any authors defined in our CMS at this point, but we can go ahead and actually add one. So what we can do here is let's just save this as is for now. Let's go back to content definitions here, and let's just quickly create an author definition.
I would say this is one of the reasons why you probably want to write this stuff down beforehand and make some decisions so that you're not doing too much on the fly. Otherwise, you'll get buried in pretty quickly and forget kind of where you are.
Yeah.
So it's always good to write it all down first and then kind of plug the values in.
Yeah. So maybe, an author might have a name and it might have an image. And then we'll just save that. So now we have that author definition. Let's go back to the case study now. And we can actually link to that. So we can say author. And here we're going to use a reference field. We call them link content fields. So what we're going to do here is we're going to link to shared content. We're going to make it so that a user selects, one author from the list. So they're going to select a specific item from a list. And they only want them to select one, right? A case study shouldn't be able to have multiple authors. It's just one. So we're going to have a drop-down list, which is select one. And then here we're saying, okay, we're going to link it to a specific list of authors that we have in Agility. Now, at this point, we don't actually have any authors as of yet.
Right. You just define the authors.
Yeah.
You just define the authors.
I don't actually have a list of authors to choose from yet, so I don't have any options. So let's just go ahead and initialize that. So I'm going to select author, and I'm going to create a list of authors.
This is new.
Here.
This is great.
Yeah, before you'd have to jump around to another section in the CMS to do this. So this does make this a little bit faster. So now we've created that authors list, and I'm going to link it directly to it.
I feel like I want to clap. That is so great. Nicely done. Okay, cool. So what did it do there?
So what this actually does is this creates a field that the editor can interact with here called author. Right. And it's going to get them a drop down so that they can select an author from their list, or create a new one to put in that list and then select it. But it also creates this hidden field here, and this is for developers. This is actually going to store the ID of that selected author that they have. So when a developer is reading the data from the API, they get a reference to the list of authors, but they also get an ID back here. And our API is actually smart enough to automatically resolve the author for you. So it'll just give you back the whole object with the actual author already resolved. But there are some cases where you might need to access that specific ID, and that's why that's here. So this needs to exist, and it gets created automatically for you. You shouldn't have to touch it.
So that's hidden. Cool.
You can pretty much ignore it.
All right. So we also had, let's see, we had our slug. Remember the URL slug? Do we want to, we can call it URL or we can call it slug. I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's call it slug.
I like slug.
And so let's rearrange some of these fields and things that make a little more sense. So I think the slug should be after the title.
Yeah.
I think the date should probably be up there as well. I think the author should also be up there as well. So they're sort of setting their metadata fields before they start typing.
I'm kind of thinking we want tabs on here because the detail, I don't know if we have the details field yet, but that's usually a big one. So we should probably reserve some area for the details field and maybe put the image on its own, something like that maybe.
Sure.
We could also preview it and check it later. I don't know. Maybe tabs would be good. Can we do tabs?
Yeah, we can do tabs. So what Joel's talking about here is when you have a form that has a lot of fields, this isn't too many fields to be honest, but if it got a lot longer than this, you might want to start organizing fields into groups just to make it easy for editors so they don't have one huge long form that they have to sort of scroll through. So, what we can do here is we can, create a concept of tabs to group those fields. So I can create a tab here. Let's call this, what do you want to call this here? Media. Actually, let me create my details field first. So we'll create a details field that has a HTML. And then let's just create a tab to put here. Let's call this content.
So now this is not really affecting the actual data. It's just affecting how these fields will be laid out on the form for the editor. So we're just trying to make life a little easier here.
So let's move company name up here. So now we're gonna have two tabs. We'll have media, which will hold the media stuff, and then we'll have one that says content.
Right.
And yeah, so let's go ahead and save that. And let's go test this out. So we're going to go to shared content here in Agility. This is where this is going to show us all the content that we've initialized. You can see the authors list that we've already created is here.
Right.
Don't have an author yet, but I can go ahead and just create one. So let's call this James. I won't bother putting an image there just yet. And let's go ahead and create our list of case studies.
Okay, so you went to new shared content, new list, and chose a type of content list, which only shows you the definitions that are of type list. And then you created a new instance of the case study definition, which is a shared content list. And it's got this reference name on there. So that kind of reminds me of a database where I have like tables in a database. So that reference name, and there's lots of places in Agility where you use a reference name, and that's really important. And it looks like as you typed in case studies, it created that reference name and took the spaces out, right?
Yeah, so this is just gonna auto-generate a reference to this content, which again gets used by developers.
Right, quite a few things happening all at once there. Cool.
Yep. So now we can take a look at our case study here. So now you can see it's similar to the view that we saw when we were editing the definition, but we now can see the tabs actually being rendered sort of in reality. And here we can see I have my author, and I can select me. And I can also jump directly to that item if I need to modify that, or if I need to create a new one, like, we can go ahead and select that from that list as well. So, we might have a case study called, this is the.
Right. It's always good to do some sample data as soon as you create something.
Case study.
Hey, let's just try it.
My slug, might be, case study
And actually, folks should go back and watch your webinar from a couple of weeks ago where you showed how to build custom fields where you could have the slug generate from the title if you wanted to.
Yeah, and actually planning to actually just put that in as a built-in field.
I think we use that almost every system. Yeah. So yeah, this should be built in, I think.
So yeah, we can select the date, you know, my author there. And, you know, then I can go ahead and either browse my existing media to select, you know, any media that I may already have in there.
Right.
Or I can go ahead and just upload something, you know, from my pictures here.
Very eclectic. So this is cool. So I upload it into Agility and it goes into like the image repository.
So it wasn't a good example I chose. I chose a GIF that was 2.8 megabytes. Let's just not use that.
An example of where, yeah, you might have used that. Don't use anything lower. I think you actually put something that needs to be at least 1 megabyte. Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
No, I said yeah, shouldn't be more. Images and company logo. Yeah, we can leave that as is. So
cool. So that's like you were able to have complete control over the layout of all those fields, put them on tabs, set up all the validation for them, and then we can go back, you know, if we're not happy with it, and tweak those things later.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we have another question as well from Solomon. He says, I guess that integration with external image repo is something feasible. So we don't support that out of the box right now. Your media is stored in Agility, but you can always upload things into media documents as you need to.
Yeah, we have had customers. We have one customer that uses like Widen because it's a digital asset management. So what they've done is they actually created a custom field, and they did some other sort of customization of the UI to allow them to use like an external repository. So it is possible to do all kinds of different stuff. It's not something that's baked into Agility out of the box. What we've done is set this up so it's super simple to get going and to ensure that you have all your images are fast because they're delivered over CDN. But it's certainly the sky's the limit in terms of integrations that are customized for you.
Yeah, and we had a question here from Ramila. Can we set up a blog page website using Agility CMS? So yeah, the answer is yes. What we're looking at here is a case study, but this could easily be repurposed for a blog post too, to be honest. You know, has a title, has a slug, actually has a lot of the same properties, to be honest. An excerpt, and it's got, you know, a WYSIWYG area for the actual main content.
You could almost create another list called blog posts.
Yeah, it could be pretty much almost the same thing. Yeah. So you just modify, you know, you might have slightly different fields for that, but the structure is the same. Like just as we created authors, you know, a blog post might relate to an author as well. It may relate to categories or tags. Those are all things you can set up that structure in Agility. If you want like a really quick example of something really basic you can do with that, our starters, if you sign up for a free account, our starter sites both have implementations of pretty basic implementations of blogs, but they're there that you can take a look at. Cool. So now we have this.
With starter sites, sorry, just to go back to that for a second, James. Yeah. So if you want to sign up for a free account, I urge you to go ahead and do that. And you get a choice between a Gatsby blog and a Next.js blog. The Next.js blog is actually newer. That's pretty recently been released. It's on Next.js 9.4. And then you can deploy that to Vercel really quickly, or you can deploy the Gatsby blog to, you know, Gatsby Cloud and or Netlify or whatever. Yeah. So go ahead, do that. Those are both blog implementations that are starters. That will help you get going.
Yeah. And so here, what I just did is I just copied another one here, just so I have a couple items that I can sort of play around with instead of just one item. So now that I've got those going, we might run out of time to cover all the things we wanted to cover in those modules, but I would like to touch on the hero as well as the module that reads the case studies. So I wonder if we can do that pretty quickly here to show.
And why don't we just let you go? Let's just, why don't you do it in real time and we'll just watch you go? Because I want to have people sort of watch somebody who's really experienced at this. What do they do? So just kind of don't slow down too much and just kind of talk us through it. And if I think you're going too fast, I'll stop you. But I just want to see you do this because it's kind of cool. It's like watching a high performance athlete.
Oh boy. Okay. I don't know about that, but sure. I'll take that. So now that we have these content things set up, the last thing we were talking about here is like, you know, how how do people actually add this content to pages, right? And so in Agility, you have a page tree. So let's create a homepage so we can start putting these things on here. Now, I don't have any page templates yet. So I'm going to create a page template here. A page template is going to tell our editors where they can add modules. So I'm going to create a page template here, and I'm going to call this one column template. This pretty much follows the design we were looking at for the Netlify site. Everything is in one big column. It's not like there's a main column and a sidebar. It's just one big column. So, and we're going to have a single content zones where editor can add things. So I'm going to call this just main content zone. Go ahead and save. So now I can go to pages here, and on my website here, I can create a new page. So I can select my one column template here. And let's just call this home page. And here I can add modules. Now, this is a blank site that I started with. There's really no modules available to actually haven't defined any. There's just a simple rich text area one. So if I was an editor, out of the box, I can't really do much. I just have a rich text module that I can add to a page, and that's about it.
But the starter sites have a bunch of modules predefined.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to show us how to do that.
So I'm going to remove that one. And what we're going to do now is we're going to define those new modules that we want to be able to add. We're going to create a hero module, and then we're going to create a case studies module that links to that case studies list that we just created. So I'm going to go back into content modeling here. I'm going to go to module definitions. These are different from content definitions. These are the definitions that you use that editors can add to a page. So they're controlling the functionality of what is on each page. So I'm going to click add. I'm going to create a module here called hero. And I'll say this displays large banner with calls to action. Normally used the top pages. So now I'm going to go into pages here. Oh, no, sorry. I don't know why I jumped out of that.
I think we need some fields.
We need some fields, yes, before I do anything else. So here on our hero, we know that we have there's a main image, right?
Yeah, main image. Yeah, we got main image, title, subtitle, primary link, tertiary link, secondary link.
All right, so let's just do a couple for now. We'll say primary. Let's use CTA. I like CTA. And I can use a URL field for this. And I also have options for URL fields, right? You can set a default value if you wanted to. You can also set it to default in a new window, open a new window or not. So I went ahead and added primary CTA. Now let's just add a secondary CTA. And maybe let's just leave it at that for now. And we'll go ahead and hit save. So now at this point, as an editor, I can go to my home page here and be like, okay, well, I'm going to have a hero module that's going to be at the top. And I'm going to set these properties. So hero title. Nice and big.
I always find it hilarious to see what developers type in as their example content. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and then
gives me a laugh.
For these URL things, you can link it to a file. You can link it to a page in your page tree, or you could link it externally. Oops, not that one. Choose page. And then I can also set a title that might be for that too, for accessibility. So I'll go ahead and hit save and close. So at this point, as a editor, I've created a homepage. I've added this hero thing that is on there. So then that's the job of the sort of architect and the editor. At this point, the developer would take over and say, okay, now I'm going to be responsible for making sure that when this module is rendered on that page, that it looks like the designs are supposed to look like, and the content that the editor has put in here are displaying on the website.
Right. So just let me back up for a second, because you said I'm creating a page. When I think of a page on a website, I think of an HTML page. On a static website, I would think of like a .html page. That's not what you just created. It looks like what you just created is like a template with some module zones, and you put, or content zones, and you put a module in there. What does that give you?
Yeah, what we've done here is we've composed a concept of a page, right, that has content associated with it and all this metadata around that page. But really, what our system provides you is we provide you all of this as data that's delivered through an API interface. A few different ways to work with that, but and depending on what website framework or language you're using, the way in which you might interact with the data may be a little bit different, but they all go through our fetch API, our REST API that pulls all this content down.
Cool. We had a question.
Yeah.
From Ramila. Can we create a global template with multiple modules? For instance, what we have for feature comparison pages for B2B products. I'm not 100% sure what she means by that, but I believe that yes. So these templates can be used. A page template can be reused as many page times as you want, and so can a module. So if you had like a feature comparison module, you could reuse that as many times as you want, or you could make it globally. I think one of the things that we talked about earlier is like that hero module could also link out to shared content. So
yes,
if you
you're right. That hero content, if you wanted to reuse that on other pages, you could actually have that hero module link to a list of, the banner content that you can select from. So you could actually set that up to reuse that content across other pages. It doesn't have to be specific to a page. Yeah,
and actually that's what we do in the Agility CMS website, because James, I remember you originally set up the content model for that one, and you said, "Oh, we often reuse the same header and banner content all over the place. So let's set up a shared list of all those banners so that we don't have to type them out again." And that's what we use on our site. So it's interesting how you can have the same design, have different content models based on how your editors and how that content might be reused. And if you have reusable content that you want to use on multiple places of the site or in multiple channels, like maybe it's not going to show up on this website, but not just on this website, but also in a mobile app, or you want to use it in your email templates, or you want to use it in other branding or something like that, you probably want to make it a shared content item or shared content list so you can reuse it. If it's on a page, it's kind of meant specifically just for that page. So if it's shared, it can be shared and reused.
Yeah. And so what I'm going to do here, just as the last step here, is I'm creating a featured case studies module. And all this is going to do is allow editors to add this to any page they want. And then they'll be able to search and select from their global list of case studies, which ones they want to display here. So I'm going to use a reference field for this. I'm going to link to shared content. There is another option here, which we haven't used yet in this case, but this is child content, which is not shared. The idea here is you can have sort of sub content. But in our case, we don't want that. We have something that's in shared content already. So we're going to link directly to that type of content. And again, similar to our authors that we did before, we want to allow the editors to select specific items from a list. In this case, we want to allow them to select many. And, we can render that in two different ways. It could be a checkbox list to select, one or many things, or it can be a search list box. I personally like using the search list box because it gives you the ability to sort and control the order in which the case studies actually appear. Whereas the checkbox list is just saying, hey, it's, I want these things. It doesn't give the editor control to sort them. So I'm going to select the search list box. And under here, I'm going to select case studies. So it's going to link to my case studies. And this went ahead and created a link content field for me. It also went ahead and created a reference value to store those selected items. And at this point, I can hit save and close, and I'm done on that. And now I can go back to pages here. And when I'm on a page, I can go ahead and now add that featured case studies module.
So this isn't going to have the case studies on there. This is just going to be a link to the case studies.
Exactly.
Right?
This is just going to reference them. So here I can start selecting. I have two items in here, and I can select those things. And I can also in Instant Editor rearrange them. So I want this one to show first. I can move those around. So that gives you a little more flexibility.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like a tag. They usually call that like a tag field. So this is the search list box. Cool.
Yeah. And then, if you're not really sure what's in the list too, you can always hit edit content here. And this is just going to show you, this is the shortcut to that whole list. So you can create new ones from there, or just get, a high level view of all the things that are in there. So you kind of know what you're looking for.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, again, the developer sort of takes over from this point and is then, okay, it's going to have this, it's going to know that this module is on the page. It's going to try to render it. And it's going to have a reference to those items already through our API. And it's going to just, loop through those items and display that content as it should be on the website.
Right. So as a developer now, I only had to write three things. I had to write my page template component. So I had to write something that's going to render that page template. And I had to write something that's going to render my case studies module and my hero module.
Yeah.
So I had to write three files basically to do. And now those things could be reused any number of times. So I could write 200 pages on this website that use that page template and that hero module and like a rich text module. And I've got a whole website. So now we had to do a bit more work if we wanted to go through all of the modules on that homepage. But in terms of like the amount of work as a developer that I have to do, it's pretty small. I don't have to create those pages as a developer. I just have to create the components that make up those pages. And then my marketing team actually assembles those pages as they need them, right? Or the content team, I should say. I shouldn't just say marketing team because, non-marketers also create content. So that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And in Zia, like I just made a copy of the page too. So like you can copy pages that may already have these content on here and modify them after the fact. You can create brand new pages, use the same modules. There's also a lot more power you can do in page templates as well that we just won't be able to get into today, but you can set up page templates to have default modules already on them. So if you know that people create the same types of pages all the time, you can sort of have your page already sort of pre-scaffolded with the modules there. So the editor just needs to go in, enter the details, hit okay. They don't have to know what modules to piece together or anything like that. So lots of different things you can do there. And I feel like we should probably do another session on this because we could probably keep going for a couple hours.
Yeah, totally. I think that I've reached peak brain on this one. Whereas like, I don't know if I can take too much more in because you've showed so much content. We showed basically looking at netlify.com, going through their homepage and breaking it down into what's the shared content that's on there, what's the different modules that could be on there, and how could we interpret the models for that content. And there's so many different ways to interpret that content. And we looked at a couple of different ways of, sometimes you just want to put it on a module. Sometimes you want to link it out to a shared content list, which is pretty great. That's awesome. We do have another question coming in. Let's see.
Yeah, let's address a few of these.
Can we clone pages?
Oh yeah, I just showed that actually. Might have missed it, but yeah, when you're on a page, you just hit copy page, and that can create a copy.
Very, very useful. And actually, a lot of folks, what they do is they actually clone an entire section. So if you have, one that comes to mind right away is a website that has like sports teams and tournaments, and they'll create like a mini site for each tournament that has like, this is the schedule page, this is the results page, this is the news of the tournament page, and they'll just clone the whole thing and just take that whole section. And now here's my next tournament subsection or micro site, they call them. So yeah, definitely the ability to do stuff with pages is really powerful. That's awesome. So I think we went through, kind of looking at a design first idea and taking design and creating a content first approach from that, which I think is pretty powerful. We got more webinars coming up. This is great. Next webinar is Thursday, August 27, using Next.js and Vercel with Agility CMS. I am really stoked for this one. This should be a lot of fun. I love Next.js and really loving deploying things and building stuff on Vercel. And I believe we have someone from Vercel that will be joining us to help us with that one as well, right, James?
Yes, we have Lewis joining us, who's an engineer on Next.js, who's joining us. August 27th. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So just in case you don't know, Next.js is an open source project that was sort of started and supported by Vercel, but Vercel itself also has its own hosting platform that does builds and also all kinds of stuff like that. So should be pretty exciting. And of course, we want to continue this conversation. So we have these events coming up all the time. So agilitycms.com/events. And at the bottom of that page, there's a link. And actually, James, if you don't mind while I'm talking, can you just grab the join our Slack link?
Yeah.
And just drop it into the chat. So you can just click on that, join our Slack. We've had quite a few people join that community lately. It's a great place to get in touch with us, with Agility folks, but also to get in touch with other people in the community and ask questions and talk about things. It's a great sort of meeting place. Also check us out on GitHub. Just search for Agility. GitHub.com/agility is all of our source code for the projects and the starter projects that we've had out there. Cool. And as always, part of the continuing the conversation, follow us on Twitter. So if you haven't checked us out at Agility CMS, that we're on Twitter. James is on there too, James K. Vidler, and I'm on there at Joel Varty. Obviously, check out the website, agilitysmith.com, which is incidentally built on Jamstack. And we were talking about some of the content model stuff. Actually, it might be fun to go through the Agility CMS content model at some point, because it's probably a little overcomplicated just for a regular site, but we just tried out some stuff and did some things, and it's pretty interesting. It works really well. Also email us, sales@agilitysmith.com, if you want to get in touch to talk about, actually using Agility and the software, some really great pricing options to get started with headless CMS. There's a free package for Agility that we'll talk about. Please go ahead, sign up for free, mess around with it, play around with it. It's free forever. Get on there and do some stuff and send us feedback, because we want to know how you're using it and how it's working for you. Any last words, James?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot in actually a very short amount of time there. So I hope I didn't overwhelm too many people there. Yeah, I think we'll actually take some of this and maybe do another session where we can just elaborate maybe in a bit more detail. And I know I just saw Rimala's comment there that she said it would be nice to be able to see sort of how it would actually look on the front end. But yeah, it's just hard to cover all of that from start to finish in one session. But we could do a smaller version where maybe we just do a more where we just go like one module at a time and actually show the output too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's a lot to go from. Content modeling is the basis of CMS, as far as I'm concerned, especially headless CMS. Yeah. And it's one of the things that we need to talk about more and show more. This is definitely a video I think I will go back and watch the YouTube myself, just to see, okay, what did we show there, and how are people going to be looking at that, and how can we expand on those concepts. So this has been great. Thank you for showing up, everybody. We've had all kinds of folks show up today. Keep coming back. There's more to come.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Take care, everybody.